This video is on how to make maintenance for your air compressor significantly easier. This is an RK compressor, but what I'm going to tell you is applicable to virtually any compressor that has oil in the crankcase. And there's a 3/8 inch plug that fits in the bottom of this crankcase, and of course it's full of oil up to here. And you're supposed to change this oil, well, depending on usage, maybe every year or every if you use it constantly in a shop environment, maybe every 6 months even. And because the oil is a pain to change in this machine, I don't do it as often as I should. So that's not a great way to be. So what I've done, what happens is when you pull the plug out, the oil just runs out the side and down the compressor, and it makes a mess. You can't catch the oil in a catch pan. It's not great. So here's the plug that used to go into the block, right? So it's just a 3/8 plug that went in like that. And what I've got here is I got a 3/8 extension. It's called a nipple. And then I've got a coupler, 3/8 coupler, and my plug goes right on the end there. So I'm going to wrap them in pipe tape, Teflon tape, and just as an extra measure, this stuff is called galvanized. Other people call it black iron, I think. Anyway, it's galvanized steel and or it's galvanized metal. So I'm going to wrap it in Teflon tape, but I'm also going to use pipe dope on it as well in around the Teflon tape. So hopefully that will keep it from leaking. That crankcase is not under any significant amount of pressure, so I really don't expect a leak. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. So I took some of this pipe dope and coated the threads pretty evenly. You don't need to get too carried away with this stuff, I guess. And now I'm going to take my Teflon tape, and a couple of ways you can do this. I like to hold the Teflon tape and screw the metal fitting into the tape. Give it a tug. You want to make sure that none of the Teflon tape covers the opening of the pipe or it narrows your pipe. And then just as an extra measure of paranoia and precaution, I'll put an extra bit of pipe dope right on the outside of those threads. And now I'll screw this guy in. Now, one thing I'd been told is the last 3 threads on any fitting are they're called imperfect threads. The bottom 3 or 4 threads in this case, they're not cut as deep or as accurately as the top. And what I've been told is tighten it down, exposing those last 3 or 4 threads. Don't try to bury those threads. If you bury those threads, you'll be more likely to have a leak. So that's this end done. I am going to crank this with a set of pliers, and ultimately this goes into the compressor, this screws onto here, and this guy goes in there. And when I turn this to loosen it, you know, for future oil changes, I only want this to loosen. So I'm going to tighten this and into the compressor tighter than I'm going to put this plug in. Okay, so here we are with the nipple installed and the coupler installed. There's pipe dope and Teflon tape on each one. It's probably overkill. You probably only need the one, but anyway, I did them both. And I'm not ready to put this cap in right now, but when I do, I will put some Teflon tape only on the cap and fill it in. And now, instead of having the fluid all run down the side of the compressor, it's going to run out through this tube and drip into my drip bucket. So I'm happy with that modification. Okay, so here I am continuing the upgrades to my vertical tank compressor, and right underneath there you can see a cutout at the bottom of the tank mount or tank stand, and that's so that you can get your hand down there and access a drain petcock on the bottom of the tank. Now this is what it looks like, this little tiny brass fitting, and it was screwed into the bottom of the tank. Well, to bend down on your hands and knees and reach in there, and I guess I don't need a flashlight to do it, but you know, sometimes it Well, there's some water in there. I like to put a cup under it and catch the water so it doesn't run over my floor. It's not located in a convenient location at all. And they actually recommend draining the tank daily. So it's, of course, I don't do that because it's a nuisance. But if it was easier to maintain, I'd probably do it more frequently. So I've bought a bunch of 1/4 inch pipe, 1/4 inch in PT pipe, and I've made a little extension here. And so I've got a nipple at that end, and then a 90 degree, and then another nipple, and then a coupler, and then another nipple and a coupler. If I could have had, you know, this piece long enough, I would have eliminated this nipple and this coupler. But is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to put pipe dope on them and wrap them and tighten them all up in my vise. Not super tight. Again, the rule of thumb is you want to tighten it down until you're going to leave 3 threads exposed, and that's the general rule. So I'm going to do that, and fortunately it just works out perfect that I can do all of this in the workbench and work comfortably, and then the final threaded fitting that goes into the tank, that there's enough clearance in the bottom of the tank to rotate this whole thing. So that's much more comfortable. I thought I was going to have to put this nipple in first, and then then the elbow, and then these individual pieces one at a time, and have to work them there. But I'm going to do it on the bench and then be able to screw it in. Okay, so one comment I want to make is I do have dissimilar metals here. So I've got it's galvanized, and I think some people call it black iron, for one of the nipples, and then each of the 90 and the couplers are also galvanized, and then the rest of my these 3 nipples, 2 nipples in this valve are brass. And traditionally, I guess you wouldn't probably mix dissimilar metals in a setup like this. I tried to get all brass because I like to work with brass. It's softer, and I don't know, it seems like the threads just bite in better, and when you tighten it, you don't have to tighten it nearly as tight to get it to seal. So I guess I like brass. It does cost about 3 times as much as the cast iron or the galvanized, but I just don't want this to leak, and for that reason I would have gone with brass. If I could get all in brass, I would have, but I couldn't. So I don't see that as being a problem. My hope is that the brass fittings will mold in around the galvanized threads, and it'll be leak free. Another point I want to make here is this type of valve, this petcock valve. I put, well, all of the threaded fittings, every one, I put a layer of pipe dope on, a thin layer, and then I wrapped it with 2 or 3 wraps of plumber's tape, and then I put another thin layer of pipe dope on. You probably don't need to do it that way, but that's just the way I've done it, and I've never really had significant problems once I started doing that. So that's the way I do it. And you want to make sure the tape is well below the opening of that valve, because obviously if it's not below that, it will interfere with the closing of that valve and the sealing of the valve. So next I'm going to assemble all of this. In the bench vise, I've already tightened from here all the way up. Now in these fittings up near the front, near the valve, they're all cast iron, right? These ones? Galvanized, I should say. From here to here, they're galvanized. So I tightened them individually. I didn't just start at the top at this valve and clamp at the back and crank them all down evenly, because the brass cannot withstand as much torque as the galvanized. So I tightened the galvanized ones to each other individually, and then I more gently, I guess, tightened the brass to the galvanized fittings. And now I have it threaded in there. And so it's just a case of twisting this in. And obviously I want to have the valve out here, the entrance to the air compressor, the final spot. So unless I think I can get another turn in, I should stop. Yeah, I'm going to go for another turn. I'm going to go for it. There we go. That'll be beautiful. So now that valve is protruding right out of here, I'm lying on the ground now, but you know, there it is right there. So it's not sticking out in a way that's going to get caught by anything. The only thing that'll be in there might be a broom, and I'll be careful with it. And then I can easily put a tray under there and reach down and not have to get down on my hands and knees to drain it. So also, if that valve leaks, it'll be pretty easy for me to change. I just changed the end, not the other stuff. So I'm going to pump the tank up now and then spray all these fittings with soapy water to see if they leak. Okay, so here we are under the compressor again. I've sprayed soapy water over all the fittings, and none of them leak except the actual valve itself. So the valve itself, you can see the bubbles coming out of the end of it. That is because it's an old valve, and dirt and debris, I noticed this when I was putting it back together, dirt and debris was in the sealing surface where the valve meets the seat, and I don't know, probably some rust from the tank or something. Anyway, it's embedded right in the brass, and when I was putting it together I thought, I wonder how well that valve really seals. But the leak is actually so small on this 80-gallon tank, I think it would take 2 months to actually drain it. So I think I'm going to just try it as is for now, and it actually should keep moisture dripping out of the tank. So though I said I didn't want any leaks, I don't in those other pipe fittings. But in the very end of the valve, I can keep an eye on it, and I'll monitor the pressure in the tank over the next week or so. I don't use the compressor that often. It's 150 or 160 psi cutout, and I will just keep an eye on it. If I find the pressure going down by more than 20 psi a week or something like that, I will I'll replace the valve. Not for cost. I got a brand new one sitting right there. When I bought them, they came in a package of 2. I'm actually thinking it might just be acceptable to have a little leak there. In fact, I know some people leave their petcock open all the time. Anyway, I'm going to give it a try, and if it drains too much water out, or sorry, if it leaks too much air out, then I'm going to simply put the new valve on.